Some years ago, I was contacted by a producer that was working on a show named Vegas. And the producer said, "You're well known in the field, and we'd like you to produce a knife for our show." And I said, "Oh," my ears perked up. I said, "Oh, this sounds great. Let's listen to what she has to say." And she said, "Well, what we want is a knife that our heroine can conceal underneath a short skirt in her garter belt. And then when she pulls it out, it's large and imposing." And I said, "Large and imposing and concealed under a garter belt under a short skirt." And I thought, well, we have some issues here. But then she said, "I want it to be the real thing. I know you only make the real thing, and I want it to be the real thing. And surely you can construct something with a sheath that will be protective, that she can, but it needs to look to where you can't see it when she's wearing her skirt, but when she pulls up the skirt, then there's this knife that she then pulls out and is large and imposing." And I said, "Well, that's something that we'll have to talk about." I said, I don't make props, and I said, "This sounds like quite a challenge." And I said, "Well, that sounds interesting." And I was going to consider it. I mean, this was going downhill fast, but your old knife maker just thinks, well, maybe there's a chance. I don't know. Maybe we can work something out. And so anyway, I said, "Well, what kind of a time frame are we looking at?" And she said, "Well, we need it tomorrow." And I took it to mean, well, we need it in a hurry, and that we've got a shooting schedule, and we need to get going on it. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I can work on it as fast as I can." I said, "I'll have to push some other projects aside." And she says, No, we need it tomorrow, literally tomorrow." And so in my foolish mind, I'm thinking, can I stay up all night and pull off something? I don't think I could do this, and this is going downhill fast. And then I said, "Well, just what exactly is your budget for this?" And she said, "Oh, well, we don't ordinarily work in that realm." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, well, it's a gratuity. We consider it a gratuity." And so now my balloon is popped, as you can imagine. If you're a maker, you're a collector, you're like, I'm going to work on this and give it away. And I thought, well, is there anything that can be salvaged of value from this? And I said, "Well, will I get credit for it?" And she says, oh, absolutely not. She said, "This is copyrighted material we're producing. There's no way that you can get credit on screen for it or off screen." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, you really can't reveal that you are the maker of this knife, because we would have to then get licensing and deal with the production company, whatever it is that they do, which I have little knowledge of, downstream after something is produced." And I said, "Well, can I feature it and show it on my website and as a creation I've made?" And she said, "No, you can't." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, can I show it to anybody?" She said, "Well, you can show it to your immediate friends and family, but you can't publicly reveal that you made the knife. There will be no credit for it, and essentially, you're not going to get paid for it." And I saw my balloon, which had popped a long time ago, was just slowly floating to the ground, and so it was all over. And I said, "Well, I wish you luck. I'm not that kind of maker." And that's just one story from Hollywood. There's others, which I thought was really kind of funny. If you're a knife maker, knife collector, knife owner, and you value the knives you make or you have in your possession, don't let people finagle you out of your work. They'll try anything. People will try. Like, I'll tell you some other stories here in this particular segment. I'm gonna reveal probably at least another one, but let's go back to the premise of this. The problem in the entire idea is people have an idea for something, but they have no concept of design. They say, "Well, you're the maker, you figure it out." I'll give you another story. A guy told me one time, this is a great design story. He said, I've got the greatest knife idea for you." And I said, "Oh, I'm listening. What is it?" And he said, "Well," he said, "you make a knife, and the knife doesn't matter too much. It could be a dagger or a straight blade or whatever." He says, "But in the handle, you have a crystal. And he said, inside the crystal is a carved figure, three-dimensional carved figure of a beautiful nude maiden, like a goddess. And I said, and that's it? That's your idea? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, how in the heck am I supposed to do this? Carve inside of a crystal? And he said, well, you're the knife maker. You figure it out. I just gave you the design. All right, so what the point is that designing knives, a lot of people think they can design knives. And I've seen, oh my gosh, I've seen so many designs in my day now. The world, for the TV show, that design was obviously impractical and ridiculous. You know, you can't have a knife that you can't see under a short skirt inside a garter and then have it be also at the same time large and imposing. You know, maybe you could use some trick of the camera, but you can see the entire project idea was a badly designed idea, thinking we can get this knife out of this guy overnight. And by the way, these knives that go to these television shows oftentimes are never returned. I don't know where they go. They go into some Hollywood mountain where they lock them. I don't know. I have no idea. But anyway, that is typical. And the world is absolutely full of badly designed knives. If you are watching this, you're a knife owner, knife collector, a knife aficionado, a beginning knife guy, a beginning maker, whatever your status is, you know an ugly knife when you see it. There's an old saying, it's you know the ocean when you see it. And there's just not a lot. You can see a bad design. And the world is just full of them, and that's no reason to make knives for a living for me. I'm not gonna work on a bad design. And designing knives is very hard. If you design knives on paper, for instance, 1/30th of an inch, that's like 0.7 millimeters or so, less than a millimeter, will make a world of difference in the way a knife appears. And this is kind of interesting. Maybe we'll do a longer dive into this, but the human mind is capable of seeing minute differences in knives that it may not actually see in things like, say, firearms unless you're well versed in them. But even a person who's a novice in knives can see a 30th of an inch difference. It becomes a completely different knife on paper. Now, knives may look good on paper, but they are actually three-dimensional. So when you look at the paper, what do you see? You see the flat perspective. You see as if the pattern were cut out and laying on a table. That's typically what is shown. Sometimes there's been, and of course in my work, I try to make sure and show a lot of different perspectives and directions of the knife, so that the potential client looks at it and says, oh, I like this. I like look, it has some thickness in the handle, or it has some thinness in the handle. It has, full file work on the spine. It's a good design in 3 dimensions, because knives are 3-dimensional, even though most of the pictures you see of them are 2-dimensional. Anyway, as you draw a knife, the best work starts from drawing. I'll have to say that. The best work there is starts from a drawing, even if it's a simple drawing. Because when you start drawing, sketching something out, you begin to think about exactly how this component is going to come together, what the pieces are. Your mind kind of grows from there into this design idea, and as the idea grows, you'll pick up your eraser, hopefully, and keep refining that design. Now, here's another great story. I didn't know him well, but I met him briefly many years ago in another location I was in. A sheriff's deputy, I guess he was. Anyway, while he would be sitting at a speed trap or wherever he was, where he was spending a lot of time just sitting in his car, he had a little notebook, and he would draw knives, and he drew hundreds and hundreds of knife drawings, and some of them were good and decent, some of them were wholly impractical, some of them looked neat. They were great, there were great designs, there were poor designs, and there was just this thick book of knife designs he had drawn. And I said, well, what are you going to do with those? Are you planning to make knives? Are you interested in seeing any of these made, or what? He says, no, I'm going to sell this. He said, this book is worth a fortune. He said, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to make a lot of money off this book. This book of knife designs is going to be something that everybody's going to want to buy. Well, the human has been around for 1.5 million years, at least that we know of. Well, as I mentioned before, they're pre-humans, but let's just say Homo sapiens sapiens. He's been around for so long. He's thought about and drawn and tried to figure just about every kind of knife design. That doesn't mean he can actually make it work. That is an art and skill in design that when you bring design on paper or an idea into a solid form, well, that's art. And that's the art of making knives. Just one of the arts, by the way. There's more of them, but that's a major one. For myself, as I've said before, I have over 500, I think 525 or more designs that are actually literally cut out, designed. What you see on the site are photographs of templates. A lot of them I've made. A lot of them I've made and I haven't photographed. A lot of them I've made and I have photographed. Anyway, they're all on that gigantic page, which is the best and most popular page on my website. And this skill of designing has value. You can be tricked out of your knife designs. For instance, and this is just recently, I had a Norwegian guy contact me from Europe, and he claimed he was in the military and he wanted a knife design, and he had all these ideas about what it should look like. Of course, he had some impractical ideas like inlaying their flag into the blade in colored gemstone inside of the blade, which I thought was wholly impractical. This was a knife that he was going to use and carry and work with in the military. And I thought, well, this sounds great. And he was so convincing, and I got so excited about the project that I didn't actually ask for a design fee. And normally I do that. I'll take a small deposit, a couple $100. I'll design a knife, or I'll consult with I do knife consultation. I'll consult about a design. But with him, I thought, oh, it sounds like the real guy, and he really wants a knife, and he's got some great background. And he says, well, I like this pattern of yours, and that pattern of yours, and this handle of yours, but this was a little different here. So I worked up 3 designs for him, and after I emailed them to him, I never heard from him again. He ghosted me. Why? Because, he's so clever. He's so clever that he decided he was going to rip off Jay Fisher of his knife designs. But the thing is no matter what, he's not going to be able to make the knives because the designs were incomplete because I hadn't actually made the knife yet. Now, which is a real interesting point, but if you are a knife maker, a knife designer, don't give away your work. People will just take your work and run with it. People will give you designs they claim are worth a fortune. I've seen this a lot. Hate to say it, with ex-military guys will give me their design and say, because I was in the military, this design is vital and valid, and you can make a fortune with it, maybe even put my name on it, and by golly, we're gonna make a lot of money with this, but it's my design. And I've worked with and talked with these guys before, and what ends up happening every time is the designs have to be changed dramatically because they're not makers. They're not knife makers. Now, some ex-military are, and that's great, and I support them 100%, but there are other guys who are like, I've never made a knife, but let me tell you what a good knife is, because I've used a knife in the field. That's wholly different than working with you and saying, let's work out this pattern, you fit it to my hand, how about if we do this blade, that blade? No, we're talking about, I'm going to present you with a design, and you're going to make it, and we're going to get rich. And it always has to be changed. And when it's changed, they get angry, they argue with you. This is silly. The knife maker is a knife maker. It's like, who has the authority, the final authority on something? If you're interested about boots, who has the final authority? Well, it's the boot maker. Because the boot maker will tell you, well, you can't do this because that'll fall off. Or you can't do this because the angle's wrong. It'll break here if you do that. But if a person isn't willing to work with the maker, if the maker claims his own designs, then you've got a problem. And the best thing to do with that is to say, look, I appreciate your input. If this is something you want made, please go talk to other people. There, you might find somebody who can make it the way you want it made and not the way I would change it to make it work in my sphere, which is professional custom knife making. So they'll give you credit. Some people will steal your designs. It happens a lot. But these are forms based in function. And until you have some years behind you understanding how form and function work together, you can make decent designs, but maybe not good designs. So, for instance, if you have a tactical knife, a true tactical knife, there's a lot of guys that like to put straight handles on tactical knives. Okay, that's not my design idea. I think it's an incorrect design idea, and I'll tell you why. The reason people leave knives mostly straight is because the blade steel that they get the knife in or work with is straight. And the less they have to remove off that, the less curves in a knife, the easier it is to construct. So let's get clear about that design idea. So, but what on the hand is straight? Are your fingers actually straight? No, they're never straight. Are your hands, is there some straight line on your hands that I somehow missed? Is there some straight line in movement and motion that is somehow existing in the human that old Jay Fisher just missed somewhere? Well, no. Your hands are curved. Your hands are curved, so in a military or combat knife, you want improved grip. And if you want improved grip, then that usually means curves. Now, it doesn't mean all the time. It may just mean a finger groove or a set of finger grooves. There are guys I have several knife designs where it's a fairly straight handle, but they're very few. That just doesn't really happen that often. And then if a knife is made for straight movement, it's not going to have a radically curved handle because that's uncomfortable to move because of the geometry of twisting your wrist and stuff. And that design idea comes from a movement or motion idea that is built into the human physiology. So anyway, the history of designs is huge. There's been many millions of knives designed over the years. I'll touch on one more thing about design. The video game field is a big field, and when someone designs a knife that's on a game platform, first off, if they design it on paper, be aware they own the copyright to that design. If it's a truly new design that no one's ever designed before, they own the copyright to it. So you can't copy that design without their permission. They could, if they choose to, they can seek civil damage complaints against you. If you were to take a design off some popular game and it was a unique and unusual design, that's the other issue. And then you were to make the knife as a knife maker and turn around and sell it and profit from it, well, you're stealing their copyright, and that's against the law. So we'll talk about copyright in a later video. It can be very complicated. It's a very interesting kind of thing that we have with knives, and can be very confusing. But the designs there a lot of times are really impractical. I've seen gigantic, monster choppers that are almost 6 feet long being held by some guy that's, whacking up the enemy or the aliens or whatever the heck he's fighting. Okay, these are just all impractical, ridiculous things. And it's not a knife that you're going to make and sell and have people satisfied with. These are like sculptural projects. If you're really determined, for instance, I'll say this: if you're determined to make or have made a knife that as a novice has designed or a video game designer has, maybe it's best to just have that as a piece of artwork on the wall, because if it's not really practical, what is the use of that? Your time is limited in how many knives you can create in your lifetime if you're a knife maker. And as far as value, as far as collector's value, that's just kind of an iffy thing. Maybe that'll change in the future. Right now, as it 2026, right now it's not really a big field that people are making a lot of investment in. Because of the unpractical nature of it. So we have to ask then, does the design have appeal in today's world? And to give you an example of that, when I was making knives in the mid to late 80s, the most popular design I had was the Angst, which is German for fear, and it's actually named for the guy who designed it, John Angst. Shout out to you, John. Great guy, wonderful human being. I love him like a brother. Anyway, he designed a trailing point, a Western trailing point. His own design. It was unique. It was a Western trailing point kind of style. The point trails higher than the spine, and a big sweeping blade on it. And it was my most popular knife for many years. And that kind of all changed, and we got into the 90s and then into the late 90s, it completely changed to the tactical Tontos that I have, like the knife I designed with U.S. Air Force Pararescue, the PJ Light or PJLT, and that is probably still today my most popular knife that I make, knife design I make, is completely different than the hunting knife. Hunting knives kind of fell out of favor in that realm, and then the tactical knives came in. Of course, you could say, well, it's because of the military campaigns or pararescue's input. Yeah, there are a million factors that go into it. That my point is that time changes and knife designs change over time. And one of the worst things I feel that you can do is you can look at other people's designs and then copy them. If you look at too many knives, if you're a knife maker, a knife collector, and you look at a lot of knives, you get your brain gets programmed into what makes a certain kind of knife have appeal and what doesn't. And it really depends on the decade that they're made, and that's why copying designs from someone else is really kind of a bad idea. A couple more things about design. I'll say, if a knife design works, it works for the client in his application. If he's if he collects folding knives that have rather straight blades or a certain kind of blade, and these are highly embellished and they have gemstone handles, well, then he's going to be looking for a certain kind of knife from me. That's wholly different than a guy who is collecting and says, well, I'm collecting, but I'm collecting tactical knives. I want the best collection of tactical knives that Jay Fisher has made. That's a different person. That's a different mindset, and I'm thankful for all of that. But it really depends. Does that design idea fit in with the idea of what is currently popular? As I've said before about knife designs, right now you see a lot of people that are hammering and leaving unfinished and blackened flats, and just a knife that makes it look like it was made in the 19th century is not any pinnacle of collector's ideal, no matter what people will tell you. And they'll tell you all kinds of things to sell you knives. If that were true, if the pinnacle of, say, hand forging and leaving beaten finishes existed in the 1800s, and it didn't, by the way, you'll have to do some historical research to find that out, people will associate that kind of finish with a good design and say, well, this proves that it was handmade. No, this proves that it was unfinished. But again, the techniques of making, the physical aspect of making may be so difficult that the knife maker decides he's going to take the shortcut and he's going to call it a design idea. So we'll do another video, I'm sure. I don't want this one to run too long, but we'll do other videos of what people call design ideas, which are actually ways they can take shortcuts and then sell you a knife that is inferior to a finely finished or finely made knife, because they're going to say, well, this is my design. This is my design. I'll give you a great one here that I think everybody who looks at this video can identify with. The paracord wrapped handle. A lot of guys will say, this is a tactical knife design. I did it this way because it's designed and it looks tactical. Because I've taken a rather straight handle and now I've wrapped it with nylon kern mantle rope, which is called paracord. And by golly, it makes a real great grip surface and stuff. Yeah, okay, take that to the field into combat. I'll ask any of my military clients, and they're like, yeah, that's crap. Because you take that into the field and that line wears through or it snags on something, you're in trouble. You're not breaking that little rope. It's some tough stuff. It will come off sooner or later. A cord wrapped handle is something that goes back to the 1600s or before, and that was only out of desperation. No fine instrument made back then in knives or swords actually relied upon a wrapped handle, and which also brings up the entire idea of silk wrapping over fish skin, ray skin, which that was a great idea and design back then, and it works for a while. But that's something that has to be redone. If you're going to use that paracord wrapped knife in the field, what happens when it gets dirty or contaminated or wears out? Then you're wrapping your knife handle with cord. The whole idea to me is ridiculous. When I have clients that ask me to build this knife to where I don't have to think about it, when I can reach down and grab it and it's instantly, I have 7 inches of primary edged weapon in my hand and I can rely on it. I'm not going to worry about it snagging on something. I'm not going to worry about it melting or tearing or ripping or snagging or coming unfrayed or any. That's, it's like sheath. Imagine a tactical knife sheath with a bunch of, and we did this back in the day. We would do that little buckskin, what do you call it? Fringe. The fringe. You have all this fringe on it. Well, it makes it look like it was made by an Indian and a Native American. Sorry, Native American back in the day. Well, no, it just more little jingle jangles to hang up on stuff, and these are all designs and styles that have. My point is, there's no real right or wrong with this. If someone wants a knife this way. If you want a knife made that way, that's fine. You need to find a maker who can do that for you. The maker should also explain to you the pros and cons of having certain designs made the way they are, and then maybe later we'll get into a video where I can show more knives and we can talk about designs, we can talk about templates and all that stuff if you want. Let me know in the comments. Keep the comments coming. Keep the subscriptions up. And I'll keep boring the crap out of you with my knife stories. If you'll tolerate it, I appreciate it. Thank you.